I think we're live. Possibly. All right, well, welcome to the ACTS Shred Talk on mental health. So ACTS, a little bit about ACTS, it's a global network of action sports ministries, and our mission is to connect leaders who are making disciples of Jesus in action sports. Our goal with Shred Talks is to gather people around a conversation that will help to validate your calling to action sports ministry, share resources, and ultimately to grow your leadership. We would like everyone to be involved in this conversation, obviously, about mental health. But to help facilitate this conversation, we've asked a few representative leaders to be on this call here. But please, if you're watching live on Facebook right now, comment in questions, invite other people into this conversation. We'd love to have everyone be a part of this. Actually, right now, one of the things we're trying to do by the end of the year is grow our ACTS Facebook group to 400 members. So if you want to invite other action sports ministry leaders to join this group, this is a community for all of us to learn and grow and share in. But yeah, so today we are talking about mental health. But before we jump into that, I want to have each of the members of our panel introduce themselves, just share your name, where you're from, what you do, short and sweet. Joel, do you want to start out?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Joel. In terms of direct involvement in ministry, I'm not working in an action sports ministry right now. I have spent the last 10 years working for an organization called Hull Services, which, as a caveat, is not a Christian organization. So I'm not representing them at the moment. That's just where my experience is. And Hull works in Calgary, Alberta, where I'm located in Canada. It's kind of the very severe end of extreme behaviors, mental health challenges, trauma and abuse history, addiction. So they have a whole bunch of different programs. I worked in a congregate care facility, staffed 24 hours a day for really, really high needs 12 to 17-year-olds for the first 7 years. And now I work at a specialized school there. And about 5 years ago, we had a skate park donated, and I got involved, and we made some connections with some of the work that we're doing. We're also one of the 9 flagship sites in the world for the work of Dr. Bruce Perry and the Child Trauma Academy, something called the neurosequential model, which is connecting neuroscience and how we can use that information to help heal from past trauma. So I started a program called Push to Heal, which is using skateboarding in specific ways to target healing various domains of the brain, and working with as a treatment alternative, basically for really high needs young kids. So that's my background.
Awesome. Just want to say hi to Allison, who's joined us she's commenting in. We got a bunch of people watching now. Say hi to all you guys. Nathan, do you want to introduce yourself a little?
Yeah, I'd love to. Hey, everybody. My name is Nathan Russell. I'm coming to you from Lakeside, Montana, and I work with Youth with a Mission, YWAM. In particular, I oversee our outdoor ministries. We have a number of different programs that utilize backcountry living skills, experiential education models, and we download those to students just through that Live Learn community with the ultimate goal of having some kingdom impact overseas in some remote places around the world. Personally, I'm an EMT, wilderness EMT, volunteer with Search and Rescue, and also teach backcountry medicine. And in particular, what draws me to that is psychological first aid. We're now teaching that alongside spinal cord injuries and talking about stress injuries. And I think some of that stuff will come up today. So I'm pretty excited to get into that a little bit. You've been in Montana 12 years, Colorado before that, Michigan, and yeah, just really honored to be here. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew, Dr. Andrew.
still not used to that. Hey, I'm in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Started and founded Battleground Skate House just south of me in Battle Creek, 2012. Johnny, you came out on the first version of that. And helped
Yes.
build it, yeah. I teach as an assistant professor for Colorado Christian University in their clinical mental health counseling program. And then I practice as a licensed professional counselor here in Grand Rapids 2 to 3 days a week. For about 15 years, I've been practicing.
Awesome.
I think that's good.
Yeah. Rad. Awesome. Well, I'm glad to have all of you on here to join us for this conversation. I know it's an important one. I know just doing some reading and looking it up, and it says 1 in 10 people in our world today suffer from mental health disorder, which can take all kinds of different forms. I would venture to guess that within the world of action sports, we have a higher percentage of those 1 in 10. But mental health stuff can take many different forms, like anxiety and depression are the most common, followed by bipolar, eating disorders, and schizophrenia. Mental health is also often associated with alcoholism and drug addiction, as well as suicide and self-harm. And of course, all of these things, as you well know, are prevalent within action sports culture. And so it's important. So let's talk about it and let's see what we can learn from each other. We'll share some resources and see how we can make a difference in the world of action sports together. So with that, I'm going to dive in here with our first question. What are some of the most common issues that you guys see with mental health in action sports? And you just jump in.
I mean, certainly from a lifestyle perspective, addiction is very prevalent, substance use, at least in my experience. And I think part of the work we've been doing, kind of connecting the neuroscience and stuff, we have we're working on some studies to validate some of this information, but my hypothesis is that you know, kind of in layman's terms, anybody who rides a skateboard or a bike or those sorts of things, you know that if you know you get in a fight with your husband, your wife, your partner, you are having a tough day and you go and you push around for a while, that seems to melt away, and there's this sort of biological connection between that type of activity and what's calming. And so I think for that reason, a lot of people, I mean, if you listen to any of the podcasts, the 9 Club, any of that kind of stuff, they'll regularly say that they feel like skateboarding saved their life or kept them out of certain things. And I think that's related to the regulatory dosing that sort of is just built into it. And for that reason, I would think that there's, like you were saying, Johnny, I think there's just a higher concentration of people that are struggling with various things in these cultures than in the general population. That's my hypothesis anyways.
Yeah.
Actually, what you're talking about is bilateral stimulation, is this clinical academic word, and they use it a lot in EMDR therapy. Actually, I got the stuff for it right over here, and it's all about activating both sides of your prefrontal cortex. And when it does that, it mimics REM sleep, and which is the healthiest state for your brain, and so you're able to handle emotions better in that state. If I can answer the question, I don't know, when I was doing the skateboard park, and we did BMX and scooter as well, but when I was in that, I don't know that I saw any kind of unusual mental illness beyond what's normal in population. It's because the circles are tighter, you see it more often, and you see it more visibly, because the guys that I was always around didn't really care what people thought, and didn't care if you saw it or not, so they weren't really trying to hide anything. And it almost became a badge of honor for some guys. So anxiety, depression, like you said, Joel, the substance abuse, you'd see a fair amount of trauma-related disorders were the most common. So
yeah. Nathan, what do you see? I guess you have more experience in the outdoor stuff rather than skateboarding. And
Yeah, I see comparison and how just so kind of speaking among kind of like staff populations, comparison to other staff people, somebody who's comparison to the ideal self, comparison to somebody else's Instagram. In ministry, everybody knows that you're always pouring out. You're coming and you're going. You got an outreach. You maybe come back and barely touch home base, and then you're going again. And so just kind of that grind, and I see that manifests itself in burnout, in anxiety, in depression, but especially in the outdoor kind of industry and sphere, that realm of trying to take it to the next level, trying to get better, and just like climbing that ladder. But there's always somebody ahead of you, it seems like, and I just can see that. I see that wear people out and grind on them a bit.
Yeah. Well, so how do you serve those in action sports who are really struggling with mental health in your ministry, or who are struggling with like self-harm or depression, drug and alcohol abuse? Maybe you deal with those differently. How do you start the conversation, and how do you address those things?
I'll just throw in to start out, just creating as safe a space as you can to bring the stigmatization down a level. Just certainly found leading with, hey, let's talk about your mental health, can kind of like build up a wall. And so becoming good at asking questions and listening, and really kind of trying to dial in with what's going on without necessarily throwing out the term mental health, and just trying to get that conversation started to see where somebody's at.
So what's funny is I was in the middle of my PhD when we were building our skateboard park, and so I was all up on the theories. There's something called ecological theory, and part of it is you create an environment that's therapeutic or lends itself towards circumstances that become therapeutic. It's not a hard thing to understand if you were to look it up, and so we really tried to build that into Battleground there in Battle Creek. And then the other thing, when I was directing it still, we would train the staff on what's called person-centered therapy technique. And anybody can do it. It's the first thing we teach students when they walk in the door, and it's all about paraphrasing, summarizing, and all those type of basic skills. And it really helps people feel like they're heard, and it gets a lot more information out of them. And if you're good at it, it just looks like a conversation. But it's like skilled conversation. And so we would try to do a lot of that stuff.
Give me an example of what that looks like.
Well, I mean, like the simplest form, paraphrasing is just simply stating back what somebody said to you, only using different words that help bring it together. Summarizing is like if somebody talks to you a lot and they don't take a breath, which happens in some of those situations. You say, so what I hear you saying is, and then you give a short synopsis, and so they know that you've heard them, that you're with them, and it helps them feel like they're cared for. And so those are just really nice basic skills that people should have, but because the kind of the world we live in, and technology and fast, people don't really have those basic conversational skills naturally, and it's something that we have to develop in people again.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is that you would ask questions a lot, and those questions would be like making sure that you understand people. How would you create, though? Both of you guys, you mentioned the idea of creating a safe space. How do you create a safe space in a skate park, or when you're out at a snowboard hill or something like that?
I will say, though, it's not even questions. It's simply restating what they've said. You don't even have to ask. And then they keep going. But I'll be quiet now. Let somebody else have it.
Joel, jump in there. Yeah. To build on that, I think, I don't know if the original question was more about people that are showing up, but I think prior even to people that are showing up, at least my experience in not-for-profits is that actual training and equipping of staff seems to be one of the last things that the budget gets used on. And I think there's so much value in getting some professional trainings for anybody who's doing any kind of frontline work, like whether it's suicide intervention skills training, whether it's mental health first aid, whether it's crisis stuff, because it's like taking a first aid course. I think that gives you really concrete skills that you can use in the moment. And typically the purpose of that first aid training and those first aid courses is to put the Band-Aid on and do some triage and then connect to long-term supports. And I think what that allows, some stuff about building up of stress and that kind of stuff came up already. I think what that allows the staff or the volunteers to do is have these really important boundaries in place that allow them to recognize sort of where their scope of practice lies and when they need to call in someone else. With suicide, for example, we're all doing this because we love people and are trying to serve them, and so it's really easy to and I don't know if anybody on this call has experienced this, but to become someone's 24-hour safety plan, to all of these sorts of things, and there may be a time and a place for that, but in general it's not sustainable. And depending on where you're located, there may be systems in place to support with that and allow you to continue to be a support that will have enough left in the tank to keep loving everybody around you and all of that kind of stuff. So I would advocate strongly for just, I mean, and the stuff around developing a therapeutic milieu or environment, all that kind of stuff. I think by doing that and by preparing the individuals that are going to be in that environment, whether it's a mobile environment like on a hill or a fixed environment like a skate park, that's how I think everybody and everything altogether is most equipped to be able to be attentive and attuned and responsive to the needs that present themselves.
Joel, something that you were saying earlier, it was kind of interesting, is the biological connection between, riding a skateboard and how that kind of like lowers your, freak out, if you will, or your anxiety or whatever it is. Maybe in designing the environment, it's, along those lines of just inviting people into a safe place where they can ride, is designing the space for to create a safe place for mental health stuff to happen.
Yeah, I certainly think it can be. Ironically, sometime in the next couple of weeks, we'll be posting a video that we did in connection with Hull and the Child Trauma Academy about like Hull will, about designing a skateboarding obstacle that can be used as a part of treatment, and how the different elements of the design. I won't go into a lot of detail. If you're interested, it's in the short film we did called Push to Heal, sort of the layout of the domains of the brain stressed in the model and what each is responsible for, and how you target them. But this short video we're about to put out, it kind of identifies how the design of the obstacle highlights what you can do with each of those domains of the brain and targets them in a different way. So I think that's a really cool, as a side note, thing that's happening in skate park building, whether it's just for skateboards or for whatever else. Is there's this sort of push to think about how much more can be done with the spaces, whether it's for visually impaired, whether it's for in all of the different ways that it's coming up recently. I think it's neat that people are paying so much more care and attention, like Dr. Andrew was saying, to the design elements, before people even end up in that space.
Yeah. Well, I love what you guys are all talking about. It's incredible. Feel like we're going through so much, from like the design of the skate park, the training staff and things like that. We have a couple of questions that have popped up on online here, and I want to encourage everybody that's watching to continue to throw more questions up so that we can ask these guys more and more. But one of the questions that was posted was about kind of regarding medication situation where a church counseled someone who was on medication for schizophrenia to go off of it, and that God could heal them. Could you guys, there's kind of this idea out there sometimes in the church and in Christianity that it's wrong to use antidepressants, that it's wrong to use medication. Could you guys speak towards that a little bit?
I suppose I should say something on this one.
Yes, doctor.
Yeah, you could call me Andrew. It's okay.
I'm going to do that all day, just
yeah,
for the heck of it.
just to set me off a little bit.
I know.
It's especially surprising that a church would tell somebody with schizophrenia to go off medication, because that's especially biological, and a lot of times those guys or gals are on lithium, and that's one that, like, you could really harm somebody if you take them off right away, like all at once. It's super, like, they could be sued big time for something like that. So in practice, in most of the circles I walk in the more the conservative Christian side of therapy, even though I practice with almost anybody, at least that I'm competent to work with, is this idea that medication is a last resort. And the only time we really put people on medication, at least around here, is when it's affecting their functioning so greatly that treatment won't even do any good. You have to get them to a certain point of functioning so that you can work with it. And then the goal is always to back them off of that medication as quickly as we can, with responsibility and care, under the supervision of a medical doctor always, or psychiatrist in this case. It has benefits. It can save lives. The problem is when we use it as a crutch, or it becomes our only mode of treatment. I really do think things like talk therapy and neurofeedback and EMDR therapy, which you can look it all up, do a lot better long term. They actually help solve whatever's going on, the problem. But medication just simply kind of levels out your hormones, if you will, in many ways, and isn't a long-term solution unless you have what's chronic, like seriously chronic in some cases. Things like
What about, just to explode this a little bit further, what about using weed or alcohol as a way to manage your depression or anxiety? It's a common conversation that comes up with the guys that I ride with out at Highland, snowboarding and stuff like that. Oh yeah, man, it calms me down.
You guys can go. I don't have.
I have some thoughts. I would say related to the first question, just to build on what, and then I'll go to that one, to build on what Andrew was saying, like so the kids that I work with, often the trauma and abuse and biological loading has just been so pervasive, that in a lot of cases, something like talk therapy they're not even, like from a cognitive perspective, for example, one of the tools we use is something called a brain map, and I just had a brain map meeting yesterday for a 13-year-old who came in, who is functioning about like a 3 or 4-year-old, but due to the trauma and abuse history, his baseline is a state of fear all the time, and so if his heart races, if somebody slams a door, he's violent immediately. And obviously not all settings are acute like that, but I think what the value of looking at an acute setting is highlighting the fact that there is this, that all of these components can work together, with the goal always being removing everything if possible, or as much as possible down the road. So we often talk about how do we make sure the environment is as conducive as possible to success. And we're lucky, we're in a setting where always it's a multidisciplinary case team that's has frontline folks involved, has clinical supervision, has family work happening at the same time. And so I guess to speak to the original question, I don't think personally using medication is faith related. I think that if you want to connect to that, God designed us to have these amazing brains that have figured out some ways we can rebuild some synapses in the brain when the medication is on. Andrew could speak to this better, I'm sure, but back closer to how these young people who are feeling the effects of sin in their life and in their environment, to where it's supposed to be. I don't see it as I see it as a resource that's available to help them manage what's going on, and definitely agree that it should be supervised all the time, that it's not a kind of choose your own adventure sort of situation. People who really know what they're doing are diagnosing and then prescribing specific, and then managing with the idea that if it's not working, they can switch, and that if all of these things that are working together, like Andrew talked about, we can dial all of that back and hopefully return the individual to quote unquote normal functioning on their own as soon as possible. So to me, it's not a faith question. I can absolutely have 100% faith that God can heal without medication while still taking medication. Those two things aren't connected to me. And then I certainly understand, and it's been challenging for me to sort out, all of this, the CBD revolution and everything associated with that. And again, Andrew could speak better, but using depressants to manage, like alcohol, to manage depression or is not necessarily a really great decision. And for me, from a faith perspective, I feel like I have a responsibility to keep my head about me and not be under the influence of things. And so I'm not well versed enough to speak to CBD oils and all of that kind of stuff and the benefits without being under the influence. But just from a perspective of being about my right mind, that's not a direction that I would ever encourage.
Yeah, and the last time I looked at the research on marijuana has been a while, but as I recall, it can degrade and kill brain cells. And then if you have alcohol, you're taking a depressant when you're already depressed. Like it's a concoction for suicidal ideation, as we call it in the system. It's foolishness. And it's if I'm ill and I need help and I'm making arguments for self-medication, I probably shouldn't be making those decisions, is what I'm trying to say, because I'm not really in my full capacity in the first place anyway, and need other people to speak into that. So.
Yeah, that's good. You guys are getting a lot of thank yous, yes, amens on the feed here. People are loving it. So I appreciate it. Just let's see here. What else we got going on questions? Nathan, did you have anything on that one?
I'll just add in real quick. I mean, I think medication can be a really beneficial tool. If somebody's having a physiological reaction to a stimulus, and there's a medication that can help calm that, so that then the talking through things and working through things, because like we've identified, our brains, our bodies, I mean, they're amazing things, but sometimes that heart just starts racing, the palms start getting sweaty, and if a medication can help minimize some of that stress response, in order to really do the deeper work of what needs to be dealt with, I think it's a really valid tool to have. I can't really speak much to self-medicating with drugs or alcohol, but I will say I deflect that a lot. If somebody tells me that they've been drinking or smoking weed, I'm usually like, well, my drug of choice is overeating at 9 o'clock at night. I'm watching football or something, and I just try to deflect that a little bit, and like, what's going on behind that? We all have something, maybe, to some degree. And man, comfort eating, that's my thing, man. And it's not good. It's especially way metabolism's slowing down. And I don't want to make light of what people might be self-medicating of, but I find that we all have a story, we all have something going on, and I try to avoid getting into too much of what exactly maybe that crutch is or that self-medication, and try to make it a little bit more about who am I talking with? What's my relationship with that person? What's going on in their life? What are the cues that they're giving me? How can I help them? How can I serve them right now? How can I connect them to other resources? But I think anything that gets in the way of our firm identity and who we are as Christians and who we are in Christ can be a really slippery slope. And there's just a number of different ways I think that manifests itself. Certainly alcohol and marijuana are a couple of those, but yeah, everybody's kind of on a journey. For me, it's eating too much late at night.
Can I say one more thing quick?
Yeah.
I think also too, one of the things we talked about up at front related to this whole conversation is the stigma that still exists around everything mental health related. And if you go to see a counselor, and if you experience trauma in your childhood and all of these sorts of things, and if we just switched the word mental out of this conversation and health, nobody would have a problem with taking some medication to help with recovery. But when we talk about mental health, and I mean, there's so much more stigma related to if you need medication, or if it's recommended that you take medication to help with recovery. And I think that's some of where the root of the concern comes from in my experience. But if you explode your ankle and the pain is beyond what you can handle, it's a little different, obviously, because they're different types of medication. They do different things. But you'll be on a prescription with a goal of easing off of that medication, not being reliant on it forever, and returning to normal functioning. That's the purpose.
Yeah. Just to play devil's advocate, to kind of blow this conversation up a little bit more, is with you, Joel, with faith and medication not necessarily being always connected. I'm gonna fight you on that just for fun. I think sometimes where this concept comes out of is people will read the Bible and they'll see demonic activity linked up with like mental health. When Jesus goes to the demoniac in the tombs and he casts the demons out, and they go into the pigs and they run down in the water, and then it says, he came back and this guy was sitting in his right mind. How much of mental health is related to demonic activity? And is that, I feel like that's where a lot of the understanding that it's faith related and medication isn't the answer, Jesus is the answer, comes from things like that. You guys speak to that?
Yeah, I can try anyways.
Sorry, I'm trying to make it difficult.
No, it's good. It's good. I mean, there's a cop-out part of the answer, which is that Jesus was able to handle a lot of situations that I'm not able to handle in the same way, and be a little bit more responsible with a lot of things that I'm not able to be responsible with in the same way, because I have a sin nature and he didn't. And to be 100% honest with you, especially based on the work that I do, and again, how acute a lot of like watching a child become violent and seeing their eyes go vacant, working with all of the, the average kid in the first 7 years of my career that I did this, the average kid had 4 to 6 diagnoses and a horrendous trauma and abuse history. and that meant very extreme behavior, sometimes 3, 4, 5 times a day. And so absolutely in the midst of those situations, I think I can understand people feeling like not putting your eggs all in one basket, in the basket of healing, supernatural healing, is saying that you don't have faith. But I kind of think of it more like tools in a toolbox. Like in the midst of one of those extreme situations where I'm doing everything I can to support with the kid with not becoming violent and coming back to reality and those sorts of things, I am thinking through my head if there's medication that would, and we don't do, the setting that I work in doesn't do, we don't give needles to calm or anything like that. But thinking through if they have, it's called a PRN, like an as needed medication that could help calm them in the moment, if there's anything I can do, if there's anything the environment can do. And absolutely, I'm praying. I'm saying, you know, your will be done right now. And if you want this to go a different way, boy, everybody here would be happy to see that. And all of those things. So I don't, I've gone back and forth on this lots in the past 20 years. And I don't know exactly where I'm at with how much mental health is a symptom of sin in the world, or is always demonic activity, or what exactly it is. There's horrible things associated with sin, like fear, that are so prevalent related to mental health and trauma and abuse and all of that kind of stuff. But I think that's a really tough one.
Yeah.
So I think there's always a relationship between sin and mental illness. I don't think we'd have mental illness but for sin. But there seems to be a pretty distinct difference, even within examples within the Bible, between those who are demon possessed and the other problems that people have as being results of sin, and the demonic possession being a result of sin as well. And when you're in the field long enough and you've seen enough people, you can tell the difference between, like, this person's just not even here, or this is coming from somewhere else, or this is something directly related to something that happened to them early in their lives. It's pretty easy to see. I just saw somebody recently whose early childhood trauma and just had the realization it even occurred, and how that affected how they felt today. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, on trauma and how to deal with it. The guy who wrote it, I'm told, is a bit of a sexist, but the book is really good. And so it's all about how, like, when things happen to us, when they're traumatic, they get stored in what's called a state memory. And it's why people who go off to war and then they come back and the gun goes off and feel like they're back in the middle of it, always are on kind of the edge of that emotional seat waiting to explode. And it's because that memory or whatever it is hasn't been properly stored within the brain, and it's always active, and your brain's trying to protect you from it. There's a huge biological component to all this stuff that most people don't consider or realize. There's 30, 40 years of research on this stuff that's respected and confirmed. And it's not to say spiritual battle isn't always present, or that demonic possession doesn't still happen. You know, it's just this happens too. It's just more results of more sin.
That's good.
I can just chime in, again, kind of speaking to the depression, anxiety, kind of situations. We work with students for 5 months at a time, and so we get to develop pretty deep relationships. And there's definitely those situations where somebody's struggling with anxiety, depression, and you start digging a little deeper, and you start seeing just behavior and choices and the condemnation that comes with those, and how that affects their lives. And yeah, it's a result of brokenness, of sin in this world. And so certainly there's that link there, that maladaptive behavior, sinful behavior can affect how you're feeling. And sometimes it's maybe plain for others to see, but really helping someone understand their choices in this, and that there's room for grace, there's room for forgiveness, there's opportunity for starting over, and then there's a network, a support network that can help you make better choices and avoid the thing that you hate but you can't avoid. And so certainly I think that's how I see that play out, certainly. And then just especially traveling and being kind of all over, yeah, I think absolutely there still is demonic oppression, and there's a lot of spiritual battles out there, but a lot more with what I work with, just kind of seeing kind of mental health challenges tied to behavior.
All right. I want to, we have a few minutes left here. You guys are absolutely crushing it. I thank you for participating, and I know I'm driving us into some hard topics, but you guys are knocking it out of the park. Let's, as leaders, well, answer this short and sweet for me. When, most of our people who are watching are leaders in an action sports ministry. They don't have like a whole mental health team with them, and they may not even have mental health training. When is the appropriate time to refer to a mental health professional or a counselor? Like if you got a kid who's coming in and, whatever, when do you say, okay, I need to refer this person?
I think if you're asking the question, do I or do I not to, you need to, I can't talk. Do I need to or do I not need to? You need to, because if you're haven't asked the question. And I would say too, find a couple of therapists or counselors or psychologists or whatever in your town that you can trust, that maybe have the same mindset, the same value system, the same belief set, whatever, that you can trust to send kids to, or adolescents or whoever, so that you could even call and consult or have them come in. If I'd have stayed at Battleground longer, we had to move on. It was good. I got to hand it off. I got to go off on its own. It wasn't a bad thing that I left, because it's running on its own now. But I would have started therapy groups in the back room. Like we would have been doing a whole big mental health side of it, because I was the contact. So if you could have somebody that could come in and even do those things, make them available there, write a grant, get some money so they can be compensated to some level, and get these kids some free treatment, it would work, even if it's just like for the health of it type of stuff.
Yeah, that's good. I appreciate it. What I want to keep us rolling. We got a couple more questions to get through, so I'll move us on. As leaders, how do you improve your own mental health, or the mental health of the people that you're working with, like your staff? How do you train them? How do you put it into them? Even during like these pandemic times in your ministry, like how are you growing your mental health or growing the mental health of the people that are serving with you in ministry?
I think a few things really quickly. I think from a leadership perspective, people need their leaders to be gentle right now. I think sort of globally, there is this traumatic event that's happened that at least the average person that I know is a bit more reactive, is a bit more stressed out, feels a bit more out of control. All of those things are symptoms of, it could be of anxiety, could be of lots of different things. But yeah, I think, and part of it is mindset based. So I have some accountability relationships in place that are always checking in with me and making sure they ask hard questions to make sure I'm where I need to be. I think another principle is that we need to look after, same as in first aid, the first thing you do is survey the scene to make sure that you're not going to end up in the same situation, then you can't help anybody. And so taking care of yourself and making sure there's a self-care routine and In particular, that comes out of, I think, the development of self-awareness, and learning to know what your triggers are, what's going on for you. And again, I would just say equipping and resourcing. So you know what you can do and can't, and how to triage things. And yeah.
I'll jump in with kind of three quick kind of points here. One is just helping our staff assess their resiliency. What's filling them up? Where are they pouring out? What's draining them? You know, like on an iPhone or your computer, there's always a process running in the background. Like what's running subconsciously that's just draining people. And along with that is also just using the term mental health. How is your mental health? And just trying to say, you know, like, hey, I'm picking up on notes of your mental health and well-being. And it's okay that we can talk about that. I think cultivating joy in the midst of this, there's this horrible lie out there that happiness is the ultimate goal. And we know that Christ was pretty clear that you know, following him is going to be a road with suffering and challenges. And so how do we have joy in the midst of pain and suffering? And so I think helping people cultivate joy in spite of and even when things are challenging. And then one of the things I get to kind of get away with just operating in the backcountry is wilderness medicine. Our staff are trained in this, and the conversation happening in wilderness medicine now and in other areas surrounding psychological first aid, and having a psychological first aid toolkit for when a stressor is introduced and a potential stress injury happens. And that could be anywhere on the continuum, from just something that might seem benign all the way on that continuum to PTSD. And just having, there's just some really robust tools out there to help people who both were maybe injured and are processing that, but also the friends or the leader or the guide and that emotional toll that it takes. Like, this happened on my watch. And there's just some amazing stuff. So not only are we preparing our staff to be able to, you know, provide first aid, but also having a psychological toolkit now. And what I'm seeing is in our staff, especially during COVID, is just a lot of introspection on that. We usually spend a lot of time getting ready for other people, but in this season, it's been evaluating, where am I at? Am I ready? Am I ready to go out, lead, to guide, to lead trips or whatever? Where's my mind, my mental health status at right now?
I was on mute, sorry. Just talking to myself. This will be a last question for you guys. Resources. So we've got a whole bunch of leaders that are commenting and saying, hey, can you get us training? Could you help us, point us towards a book, a podcast, you know, professional training? You know, what do you guys have resources that you could share with all of these action sports ministry leaders that would help them kind of get started? I have this on my shelf. It's a book from Group. I got it when I went to youth ministry class in, you know, school, and it's called the Emergency Response Handbook, and it just has, you know, different topics: abuse, divorce, addictions, and it walks through some Bible verses, just lists them and offers some tips of how to take first steps. That's one resource that I pull out sometimes when I'm just a little lost. It's helpful to get some scripture to dive into with the kids that I'm talking with. What other resources do you guys have that you could share with everyone?
So a friend and colleague that I teach with, Mark Mayfield's his name, has a book that he wrote for Focus on the Family on working with those who are depressed and suicidal. It's a really good one because it's built for more people who don't have licensure or professional training. The other thing is, if I could get my information out, I've got a connection to several people who do trainings in specific areas. If you need them, that would be happy to do them by Zoom. I even could do some myself. But there are some other folks that I know that I teach with and have worked with in the past to do really good work on that. So even if I can just be a resource myself, I'd like to be, having been in this. So.
Awesome.
I'll add real quick. some of you might be familiar with the Wilderness Risk Management Conference that Knowles and Outward Bound put on. It happened this fall virtually, and those resources are available online. There's some very specific workshops talking about post-incident trauma debriefing and talking about psychological first aid. And then if you click on some of the links, then there's links to the research and to the people that are really out there on the front lines with the whole psychological first aid conversation.
I would say, I'll try to be really quick. The work we do, it comes out of the work of Dr. Bruce Perry and the Child Trauma Academy. When COVID started, he started a YouTube channel. If you go on YouTube and search info NMN, I think there's 18 videos up that are 20 to 25 minutes that are specific to different neuroscience concepts and helping you understand what's going on for you and what's going on for the folks you work with in the midst of COVID. I think that's a really great resource. A really tiny little primer specific to skateboarding, but I think a lot of the principles can be, well, I know they can be transferred to riding bikes, surfing, snowboarding. We made a film called Push to Heal that the Child Trauma Academy supported, 15 minutes long. It's on Vimeo, and that has the concepts built in. And then I would encourage everybody to find out call around to local resources in your area, do a dry run, ask them what each one of them provides. Even call if you have a distress center lines, if you have any of that kind of stuff. With any other kind of emergency planning, we would have a plan for an emergent situation ahead of time. And so a dry run is really valuable. That's something a colleague suggested to me before. And then lastly, a lot of the trainings that are available professionally are scaled. So for example, with suicide intervention, one of the biggest international ones is called LivingWorks. They provide the training, and they have a full 2-day one called Assist. They have a 4-hour one called Safe Talk, and they have one that is just an intro to the idea that I think it costs $30 in the States, that it's a 1-hour online training. So for not-for-profits where budgets are restriction, that kind of thing, LivingWorks is a way to track that down. And there's a few people in the field, not necessarily in the Christian circles, but for example, I've been working with John Rattray to figure out ways that we can get more suicide intervention training out. We have another video coming out later this week, probably, that's related to an event we did together that has that kind of stuff in mind too. But yeah, especially locally, find the resources that you know are available that you can, so you know what tools you have in your toolbox when something comes up.
Yeah, that's so key to just have a list of a couple of counselor folks that you can reach out to, so that when a kid comes in or whoever it is that you're serving and they say, you know, I'm struggling, you can just bam, yes, let's go right now, get this guy on the phone and let's get you set up, so that you have a thing to respond with. Everyone's asking, hey, can we post those resources into the group? If you guys are all in there, we can try to get some of the links posted to these things. I know it's a lot of stuff, a lot of information. One thing that our staff did here, we all went through mental health first aid training. It was like a day-long course where, you know, we just learned about how to, it's very like triage a situation and then pass off to a counselor or a mental health professional. And that was really helpful for our staff, just to get a better understanding of what it looks like, what to look for, and what to do when it happens. And so, yeah, super helpful. I will probably spend some time chatting with you, Dr. Andrew, about trying to get you connected with some of the folks on here to offer some further follow-up, and same with you guys, Joel and Nathan. Because I think that there's a big need for this. There's a lot of people that are interested in asking for more support, more training, to learn more. I have this crazy vision that, you know, we have 70 some action sports ministry partners around the world that are making disciples in action sports. And I have this crazy vision of, like, if we're truly making disciples of Jesus, the mental health stuff that's going on, and the way that people are abusing drugs and alcohol as a way to deal with it, and committing suicide and all of these things, that if we're truly making disciples the way that Christ did, that some of that should get worked out. And so that's really my challenge to all of you that are watching. I want to encourage you in the next 24 hours to take action on this. If you are thinking about somebody or praying about somebody that maybe is struggling with mental health, I want to encourage you in the next 24 hours to get on your phone, get on your Zoom, your Google, your texting machine, whatever you got, and reach out to that person and just let them know, that you're there for them, that you love them, and that God loves them. And I hope that goes out all over the world, and that we can make a difference in the next 24 hours just with that challenge. So I want to encourage you all to do that. We are going to have January 9th, another Shred Talk, and that one will be on mentoring, empowering leaders, coaches, and sages to secure the next generation. So please save the date. Let us know if you want to be involved in that. And let's continue this conversation on mental health in the comments on Facebook in our group here. And thank you guys so much for participating and dealing with my, fun questions. And yeah, I appreciate you guys all so much.